What is up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here. Welcome to day 6 of Vlogmas, and welcome to the table. Well, not this table. Today we're diving into my other biggest hobby, and that is board games. But before we dive in, gotta ask the most important question of the day. How are you doing today, Patrick? Are you having a good one? When I say the word board game, there are lots of ideas that may pop into your head, and depending on how old you are or what you grew up with, that could change entirely. Board game could mean something like the classic of owning an entire side of the board in Monopoly, getting Australia first and sitting there waiting on your dominance in Risk, or even the classic roll of the die in Yahtzee, pressing your luck. Pretty close to a full house right off the bat, we'll take that. But here in 2023, when we say the word board game, most often people are no longer thinking about games like this. They're thinking of the hobby gaming world, where board games have gotten, well, just a lot more, is probably the best way to put it. In fact, I, with my friend Jason, have actually started a board game podcast called Bards of the Board, where we talk about new games that branch and move beyond the monopolies, risks, sorries, and lives of the world, trying to take you into the modern board gaming era. We put out an episode every other week, but I got together with my co-host Jason and sort of thought about some classic board games and what would be a good transition or introduction into the modern hobby gaming world, kind of taking the branch from the base games that you know and love with this sort of easy formula. If you like this classic board game, then you probably are going to like this modern take or sort of more updated option. We got a lot here, so we're going to move fast, and I will be 100% transparent that I don't own all of the transition games I'm going to talk about, so we are going to have to settle for some stock photos and videos from the interwebs. Now, most often when people are going to introduce you to the hobby gaming world, they're going to take that next step with you into one of usually 3 games, I would say. The first is going to be Settlers of Catan. Catan for short, or Settlers, depending on the hip lingo that people are trying to use. Definitely the most common and an award-winning game that I would say truly revolutionized or has helped bring so many people into the hobby gaming world. Definitely one that pretty much everyone should own in their collection, but I don't even play Catan that often. We own it because you can't really have a board game collection without it, but all my stuff is still in the plastic here inside, but definitely a classic. Another one is Carcassonne, and Carcassonne I got introduced to by my brother, and you can see my instruction manual is even torn. We play Carcassonne a whole lot more. This is a tile laying game where there are a variety of tiles that have different shapes. Some have grass, some have cities. You're essentially building an entire kingdom and scoring points as you play that kingdom. So another great concept or idea that Carcassonne introduces you to. And the third would be Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride, one of the most common, and I would say even between all of these, probably the most basic at its core, where you're building train routes all across, in the base game, America, but there are expansions that allow you to build across Europe and Germany and all sorts of different things. I actually don't even own Ticket to Ride in my collection. We ended up buying it for my in-laws, and it stays at their house. Once again, these are 3 honorable mentions that I think will definitely be listed in lots of people's lists, but still not the ones that we want to talk about today. Like we said, we have the formula. We're talking about if you like this game, then you might like this game. So without further ado, let's dive on in. We're going to take a quick break from board game boxes and talk about another important box in the disc golf world, and that is DiscBox. 2 of my favorite things about DiscBox are their durability and the ease of putting them together. As someone who is constantly going to fields and courses to film video, having DiscBox available to carry my disc to and from, especially when I'm shooting a unique or different option, is incredibly helpful. And trust me, y'all, I put these things through the ringer and they are still holding up super firm and super solid. Whether you're storing putters or drivers, these boxes hold so much and they stack super easily, which means you can probably make your significant other a lot happier by putting all of your discs, rather than sitting in random piles around the house, in these beautifully designed boxes that are just going to stack up and keep it out of sight and out of mind. They even have tons of fun designs beyond just the standard brown box. And after all, one of the best things about putting them in the box versus on a shelf, it's really hard to tell how many are hiding inside that box. I'm just saying. So be sure to head over to DiscBox to support what they're doing, and I'm so grateful that they're willing to support what we're doing here on the Robbie C channel for Vlogmas. We're going to start out with a classic. If you are a card player and you enjoy playing trick-taking games like spades, rook, Hearts. These are all fantastic games that get played quite often, even when we aren't inside the board game world. But I would say, being raised as a family of 4 initially, we played spades all the time. And trick taking has always been a core part of really just my enjoyment of strategy overall in general. And so if you enjoy trick taking games, then you're definitely going to like The Crew. The Crew is a collaborative experience where you're taking tricks, but you're doing so as a crew of engineers moving through space. There are certain challenges that are going to be dealt to you, and in certain hands, certain players are going to have to take a trick that contains a certain card. Just like a standard deck of cards, there are 4 colors instead of suits, and the numbers instead of 2 through ace range from 1 through 9. You can communicate with the crew around you, but you can't actually use things like, oh, I have the blue 6. Because of that, it makes for some really fun dynamics, especially if you're playing with a crew of trick-taking fans. This is a phenomenal time. It even has a playbook of 50 missions that you're supposed to work your way through. I played this with Jason and his wife Elizabeth. We played it several times trying to work through the missions ourselves, and I can't wait for my next trip up there when we get to continue working through the crew. Now, of course, we have to arrive at a classic, and that is Monopoly. Monopoly is beloved by so many, and honestly, it's kind of hated by a lot as well. For people who really like Monopoly, if you're looking for a faster paced version and you've never heard of it, Monopoly Deal is a great alternative, still within the same Monopoly universe, but not the game that we're going to suggest today. The game we're actually going to suggest today is called For Sale. For Sale essentially comes in 2 phases. In the first phase, you're going to be building your deck and bidding to get certain cards and certain values and things like that, using the money that you have in order to do so. In the second half of the game, once you have your deck in your hand established, there's going to be a host of dollar values played out, and then everybody's going to play a card in secret. Once you've played your card in secret, it's then going to be flipped over and sorted out into seeing who gets the value. Some of these values are actually going to be negative. I have a friend, Hunter, who absolutely loves Monopoly, and for a long time had been playing Monopoly every single night on his phone. He played the game For Sale and loved it so much that by the time they even went to play a second round of For Sale, because it goes really fast, which is a nice alternative to the long, grueling games of Monopoly, Hunter had actually already purchased a copy for himself. Next on our list is the game of Clue. Detectives everywhere. Anyone who's had any curiosity and gotten to play the game of Clue, it's something classic. There's always this rush trying to gather information and push your way back to the middle where you get the chance to pop open that envelope and see if your detective skills paid off. Watch out, Sherlock Holmes. I'm coming for you. Clue is such a unique experience in that everyone has information and you're going throughout the game trying to deduce that information while also moving around a board. Mysterium takes the idea of hidden information and takes it to an entirely different level, and I actually describe Mysterium to most people as reverse Clue, rather than a setup of where there is one murderer, one murder weapon, and one room that it happened in. In Mysterium, a host of detectives have arrived at the mansion to find out what murder happened. But the thing is that one of the players will serve as the ghost who's giving information out to all the other players. In front of them, they're going to find a host of murder weapons, a host of rooms, and a host of murderers. But each and every player has been assigned a specific murderer, weapon, and room that is tied to them. The ghost is then trying to give clues based on this beautiful picture card to each of the players to get them to guess and make their way to the final room. The art itself is so incredible, and it's actually more of a cooperative experience because you win if everybody makes it through to the final room in the final guessing opportunity. We have had so many fantastic game nights, especially with players trying to get into the hobby gaming world who aren't necessarily ready for a super heavy or intense game. Mysterium scratches the itch super well, and you get so many fun stories made out of this game where people are looking at a clue that's been given by the ghost, and then they realize what they're assigned to, and they're like, how in the world was I supposed to get there from this card? Next up, we head to a dice rolling adventure in Yahtzee. I love Yahtzee, and in fact, almost every cruise that I go on and my personal adventure backpack that I take, long before I had a disc golf bag and I was taking it everywhere, I always had 5 die in my bag so that at any time we could actually just play Yahtzee. Yahtzee's super simple at its core. before, and the game that we're going to suggest as an alternative to Yahtzee is called Sagrada. Sagrada is such a gorgeous game that involves dice and looking for specific pieces. In Sagrada, you are window makers who are trying to build a fresh stained glass window for the Sagrada Familia. In this beautiful piece of art, each round there's going to be a set of dice that are rolled out. These die are going to be different colors and have obviously different numbers that get laid out. Then you're going to go through the available dice options and you're actually going to draft a color with a number on it and put it into your window that's sitting in front of you. Now there are rules here where you can't have two numbers that are the same touching each other. This creates a very fun environment where everyone is building these beautiful boards full of colored die while also relying on the luck and the roll of the die, because it's not simply about the die being rolled, it also depends on what dice are being pulled out of the bag and what you're looking for at the time. Sagrada is one that instantly became a top 10 game for me and my wife as we played it, and we love getting the chance to take Sagrada to the table with other people. So if you're a dice lover, didn't get the Yahtzee, but we did get the large straight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next up, we have the game of global domination, Risk. Friend Brody Smith, obviously a grand master online at playing Risk. And Risk is definitely one that I would say amongst some of the others that we've talked about feels like it's on like a higher strategic plateau. Just because I think so many people try to look at this game and then get overwhelmed by it. And if you think Monopoly games go long, I have seen games of Risk last for an eternity. So what's our hobby game alternative? It's going to be Small World, which is definitely up there on my highest list of games. I love Small World. Small World, in fact, is one of the first hobby games that I ever played that I instantly bought myself because I loved it so much. In this game, rather than moving across America, you find yourself in sort of a fantasy realm where there are a multitude of races, including mythical things like giants and elves and orcs, and each of these has a unique faction ability. Those factions can then be paired with superpowers like bivouacking, flying, reinforced, berserker, things like that, which allow it to have a different conquering ability. As fun and as much as I enjoy Risk, the base game of Risk can really have a lot of limitations to it and feel like it gets stuck and gets repetitive. Small World, because of the fact that the factions and superpowers are paired up differently every single time, the replayability of this game is through the roof. Thinking about the list that we're sending in this video, I might honestly say this is my most played amongst all of them. Next on our list, we have the word games. I actually, looking at this, realized we don't own Scrabble. Scrabble is absolutely a classic and a true wordsmith. You would think, being married to a librarian, that we would play a ton of word-based games, but fortunately we just don't sit down for Scrabble too often. Now, an alternative that we do own is actually called Boggle, where you have die that have letters all over them. You're gonna take these die, put them inside the Boggle cage, shake it around, and then you set the timer and spell as many words as you can, not repeating any of the letters. Now, my board game alternative is actually one called Paperback, which Paperback is a card drafting and deck building game that kind of capitalizes on building words itself. Your deck starts with 10 cards, which has a host of 5 base consonant letters and 5 wild cards. You draw 5 cards out of your hand, and then once you draw those 5 cards, you're going to try to build a word with those 5 cards. Depending on how good your word is, that gives you spending power to then go to the bank of cards that's in front of you and buy more letters that you can then add into your deck and keep trying to build words using those dollars to then buy victory points, which allows you to win the game. Deck building is something that is huge inside the board gaming world, and the idea of a deck builder combined with a word game is such a clever idea, and one that I know we definitely plan to own soon at this house. Yes, I did marry a librarian, and I'm going to get absolutely demolished by her in that game, but I love a good challenge and I love playing word-based games because it allows me to try to expand my vocabulary every single time we play. Next on our list, continuing down the road of knowledge, is Trivial Pursuit, which we definitely don't own Trivial Pursuit. There's a restaurant in town that we go to. It's a little diner. They have Trivial Pursuit cards on the table, so we end up just playing trivia games like that. We also, my wife and I, go with friends to trivia every Monday at a local brewery and have a fantastic time there. What's my alternative to Trivial Pursuit, it's actually a game called Wits and Wagers, which is a fantastic trivia-based game. But the cool part about trivia is you actually don't realize how much you know in your life until you're tested and pushed to see, oh, wow, yeah, I actually did know that. That's pretty neat. Wits and Wagers is going to ask ridiculous questions that all have a number-based answer. How many yards long is the Golden Gate Bridge? Everyone's going to write an answer down in secret, and then they're going to place these answers down on a betting board. The betting board is going to range from the average answer out to the most extremes. You're then going to take your 2 betting chips and you're going to bet on 2 of the answers. They could be yours if you feel like you have an educated guess, or you can kind of spread them out to play the odds. Then once you find out the correct answer, you're going to go to the closest. That bet is going to pay out. You do this for a fixed number of rounds, and throughout the game, you're going to be realizing some people know a lot and some people are pretty good at making an educated guess, while the whole time you're learning along the way and having a great time. Next up is a classic for me, or at least the Crawford family in general, because I have played this game with my Aunt Valerie so many times. The wheel spin is a staple amongst board game design, and when I was trying to think of alternatives to life, because I knew I had to include this in there, but it's not necessarily about just getting to the destination, it's about the road along the way. Stopping on the most spaces, having the most things happen to you most often ends up resulting in winning the game of life. Now, my alternative to this is actually a game called Tokaido. Tokaido is a travel-based game, once again, where you're trying to enjoy and maximize the journey. You're traveling across an iconic route inside of Japan while trying to stop and soak in as many things and experiences as you can. These can be food experiences, this can be stopping at hot springs, this can be a host of different things that you gather points on as you move through the journey. Some games where you're trying to move through, it really punishes those who are moving slower and soaking things in. On life, you always see everyone finish, and Tokaido plays the exact same way. You get the joy and comfort of knowing that it's not about racing there, it's quite simply about enjoying the journey. Now, sorry it's taken me so long to get here to the classic game of Sorry. Sorry is a wonderful game that is very simple at its core. I even played it with my nephew when he was about 5 years old. But one of the classic parts about Sorry is the bumping back and forth and, oh, sorry, I bumped you. Oh, sorry, I sent you back to home. Sorry, I switched places. Sorry has so much player interaction, and this game is sitting just outside of the Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, and Settlers of Catan area, and that is King of Tokyo. King of Tokyo is a die-based game where you are commanding a kaiju, or a large monster that is trying to become the King of Tokyo. You might even say this is kind of a blend of Yahtzee as well, because on your turn, you're going to get a host of dice that have a multitude of actions on top of them. These can be attack, this can be health, this can be power up, and so you're going to take all of these die, roll them, and then based on what you get, you can pick up and try to re-roll again until you get the hand you're looking for, or you run out of re-roll attempts. This is a game that you can win in one of 2 ways. You can either win by gaining enough victory points, or you can simply be the last monster standing. If you like the go-get-you elements of Sorry, King of Tokyo is a fantastic alternative that, instead of having the monotony of just drawing card after card and waiting and, oh, I didn't get anything, it's not my turn anymore. In King of Tokyo, you're rolling dice every single time your turn comes around, which makes it fantastic for player engagement and makes it a super fun and smashing time. So that is going to do it for today's episode of Vlogmas recommending board games. Now it's time for you to head to the comments. Are there games that we didn't talk about that are classics that you're like, oh, I wonder what a modern hobby game version of that might be? Are there games that we did make suggestions for that you as a hobby gamer watching, because I really do love how much crossover there is between the board game and disc golf space, that you would actually recommend that we check out and people can use? As always, I want the comments to be a safe place full of positivity, but also a great resource for future viewers to come and use as well. As the final note, and I'm pretty sure I'll have flashed this on the screen the whole time, I'm going to have links to all the games that I mentioned down below for you to check out. If you're thinking about buying the games and you go through these links right here, supports what we're doing here on the Robbie channel, as well as getting you a brand new awesome game. Thank you so much for checking this out. I know this is going to end up being a longer episode, but it's a game that we get super passionate about. And if you want to hear more board game discussion, be sure to head over to the Bards of the Board. You can find us on YouTube and all of your podcast platforms for a new episode discussing a new game every other week. In the meantime, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Vlogmas this year. We hope you have a great rest of your day and you can make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we're going to leave you with the birdie.